In my last video, I talked about how in macOS Big Sur, there are some pretty big tells that imply touchscreen Macs could soon be on the horizon. It seems that a lot of you agree with me that that's a rational way to think based on the response received in the video, but there were some who dissented fairly, saying, why would Apple put a touchscreen on a Mac when they could just put the Mac on the best touchscreen they sell, the iPad? The notion of putting macOS on a tablet is not entirely new or novel. This is an Axiotron mod book, and the company that made this has some crazy history, and this product is extremely rare, so stay tuned. I've got a video coming on this at a later date. But this is a 2006 MacBook that has had its keyboard and display ripped off in favor of a touchscreen display that is controlled with a Wacom stylus. You basically have this little pen here, and you can touch the display and do mostly everything you would want to do. It has handwriting recognition, you can use drawing apps. It was kind of the poster child of this is what Mac should be. In practice, it's really not that great because it doesn't have a traditional touchscreen. This was made in 2006 after all. So, want to use your finger? Too bad. You can only use the pen. Want to type something out? Too bad. They got rid of the keyboard to fit this touchscreen layer in. So it's a little bit limited, but I think running macOS on a modern tablet could make a little more sense with how much technology has progressed. I mean, think about it. Most of the modbook shortcomings have been fixed with the iPad. It has a real keyboard. You can touch the touchscreen, but it also still has a stylus. Oh, and hey, a trackpad. That would be nice, right? It's thin and it's light and it's practical, and it has the same silicon as the upcoming Macs. So how can we run macOS on an iPad today? Ah, like remote desktop. Well, no, because that's not running natively on the iPad. And then you have a bunch of other issues like it typically traveling from your computer to a server and back. So it's not responsive at all. You certainly couldn't do audio or video production over remote desktop. Additionally, scaling is typically weird because your iPad isn't a standard display size that's used in macOS. And then to make matters even worse than that, cursor input is generally a joke. You can seldom point and touch. Sometimes you have to drag your finger across the screen as if it were a cursor. Just, ugh. Well, duh. Why would I use remote desktop when I could use Sidecar built right into macOS Catalina and iOS 13? Well, it does fix some problems that remote desktop has, like properly scaling to your iPad's display and being incredibly responsive. But it does so because you're on an ad hoc connection established between your Mac and your iPad. It's not native to the iPad. And the biggest issue of all is that you can't use your finger. You need to use either a mouse or a pencil. Hardly ideal. So what's the solution? Well, with an app called UTM, we can run a virtual machine on the iPad itself. Now, you're probably thinking, wait a minute, there is no way that Apple... What happened to my shirt? There is no way that Apple would allow me to run virtual machines of macOS and Windows and Linux on my iOS device from an app that I could find in the App Store. And you'd be correct. UTM is not found in the App Store. You have to install it using the Alt Store. Alt Store, that sounds familiar. Yes, that's because we use the Alt Store to install the iOS 13.5 uncovered jailbreak, and also the Dolphin emulator, which allows you to run GameCube and Wii games on your iOS devices. Alt Store is pretty simple when you think about it in large terms. Apple allows users with their Apple ID to sign apps to their devices. Why? Well, if you're a developer making an app, you need to test those apps on your device before you publish them to the App Store. If you're a registered developer, which costs $99 per year, Apple will allow you to install an app on your iOS device and refresh the certificates once every year. If you're not a developer, you can still install apps on your iOS device, but you need to re-sign them every 7 days. Alt Store basically tricks the App Store into thinking that you have made an app and you are trying to test it on your own device for development. So you use your Apple ID with your password, which gets sent to Apple. Alt Store never sees it, so that you can request certificates to sign third-party apps that you actually haven't made, but Apple thinks you have, to your individual iOS device. This allows you to run an app like Alt Store and to install other applications like UTM. So there are a couple prerequisites. We need our device to show up on Wi-Fi so that we can actually sign the apps. And then on the Mac, we need to use the Alt Mail plugin. It's pretty simple. There's instructions on the website and in the video that I've linked in the video description, as well as the card I mentioned earlier. And then you go Install Alt Store and click the device that you want to install it on. Now, you need to enter your real Apple ID and password. This data never gets sent to Alt Store. It just goes to Apple so that you can sign those apps. But if you're uncomfortable with this, as is, you can actually create a burner Apple ID and just sign apps that way. I'm going to press Install, and then I'm going to press Continue, and then I'm going to press Continue again, and it's going to take a couple seconds, but you'll see, and this is actually all happening over Wi-Fi, so I can unplug it, Alt Store arrives right here on my iPad. I can open it up, and there you go. This allows us to install third-party apps on our iPad. Now, we need to actually get UTM. So if you are not part of the Alt Store kind of beta, which most people aren't, I am not, you just need to go to Safari, and then you go to UTM, and then for Alt Store sideloading, you press Install Alt Store, which we've done. You press Download the latest IPA release. That'll take us to GitHub, where we can find the UTM IPA file. We download that through our Safari web browser, and you can see it's downloading right now. Once that file is downloaded, we go back into the Alt Store, we go to My Apps, we press the plus button, and then we press utm.ipa, and that will install UTM on our iPad. And once that's done, well, we're done. Now it's time to start creating virtual machines. Okay, so we've got UTM installed. Let's open it up. And there's really not much of anything going on. We're going to have to create a virtual machine, obviously. And if you press the plus button, you can name the virtual machine. You can choose the architecture. And because this is based on QEMU, there are tons of options. You can emulate, of course, x86, ARM. You can even emulate PowerPC, so we could run really old versions of macOS. The list goes on and on and on. We're going to stick to probably x86 emulation, and then we also need to select how much memory is going to be allotted to the individual virtual machine that we're going to be emulating. And this is where things get a little tricky. iOS doesn't have much memory as it is. My iPad Pro has 6 gigs of RAM. The iPhone 11 Pro, for example, has 4 gigs of RAM, and older iOS devices have even less RAM. Having a little bit of RAM is not very good when you're trying to emulate modern operating systems. You need RAM, and memory simply doesn't exist on iOS. Furthermore, if you use too much RAM, you can specify how much you want to use. But if this app, if UTM starts to ask for more than what iOS will give it, iOS will just kill the app. So you really need to kind of play the game of how much can I allocate to the virtual machine without the app crashing, essentially. Developers recommend about 20 to 25%. I have 6 gigs of RAM. I'm going to push it to 2 gigs of memory, which is about a third, but we'll see if that ends up working, just because anything less than 2 gigs of RAM on modern OSs, and it's going to be a joke. So let's start with an emulation. And one thing you could do, of course, is create a VM, which we'll do in a minute. But there are a bunch of pre-built, pre-compiled VMs, which is actually pretty cool. They're already set up. All the settings are done. All you have to do is download them as a zip file. So like Android 9, for example, we've downloaded into the Files app. I can tap Android 9. It's going to unzip here in the Files app. And now I can just tap Android 9.0 UTM, and that, I'm guessing, opens up in UTM. And yeah, it does. And in fact, it looks like it's already set up and ready to go. All I have to do is press play. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I am going to allocate a little bit more memory than what it is by default, which is 1024. So I'm going to do 2048, give it 2 gigs of RAM. And I'm going to press, see, it's giving you a warning saying like, hey, you might have issues. I'm going to press done, and I'm going to press run. And hey, look at that. Android x86 is going to boot automatically in 1 second. Wow. Okay, well, let's see how long it takes to boot. Okay, I'm throwing in the towel. I give up. We've been here for more than half an hour, and it's still not doing anything. The VM's not frozen. I mean, the boot animation is currently moving across the screen, but it is not super great. I tried rebooting and no success. So maybe Android was just not destined to run on the iPad. I don't know. Let's try one more attempt at Android, though. This is Android 4.4 Kitkat. So this is pretty old. Kitkat, as far as I remember, released in, what would have that been, 2013? Something like that? Look, it's done. Oh, our battery is very low. Do we have touch support? Ooh, no, we got cursor support. And oh my golly. Come on, cursor. Oh no. Where is it? Oh boy, this is very bad. Oh, wait. The cursor's down here. Come on. Come up here. Come up over here. Oh. Why doesn't it attach to the cursor? That's kind of a bummer. I have this strange feeling that Android was never meant to run on an iOS device. Let's try something else, like Windows. Not Windows 10, not Windows 7. Vista? No. Let's install the best Windows there ever was, Windows XP. People say that. I really don't think that's true. Windows 10 is the best Windows there's ever been. Anyway, I digress. So we need to go up here into the top right and press Create VM. Okay, we're going to rename this as Windows XP. Our architecture x86 is good. That system is correct. Let's increase our memory again to 2048. Let's give it 2 gigs of RAM. Now we need to set up its drives. This is where things get a little bit tricky. Hang with me here, okay? So we're gonna add a new drive because we need to give it a hard disk, right? So we need to give it a path or location that it should save this disk to. So we're gonna press Add, and then we're going to create a new disk. And that disk is going to be called, I don't know, Windows XP. We're going to give it an install size of, let's do 15 gigs. So that's 15,000 megabytes. I'm going to press Save. It's creating the disk. OK. And now I have to select the disk, so Windows XP, and now I have to tell the system what it actually is. OK. That's going to be a disk image. That will allow us to make that our hard drive virtually, so to speak. OK. We're then going to create a new one, and we're going to go to Path, and we're going to add. Now we need to add the Windows ISO, okay? So we're going to go to Import. We'll go to our Files app, and it looks like right here, we've got our Windows XP ISO. We'll select that. And now for image type, we need to change that to CD. You'll remember Windows XP had a CD DVD install that was basically mounted as a disk. So we need to respect that, do a CD mount. And now we have a CD with Windows XP, the ISO, a bootable disk, and now we have a disk image, a virtual hard drive that's 15 gigs onto which we can install Windows XP. So once we've done that, we should press Save, and we should be able to boot it. So let's press Play, and it looks like it is working. Windows setup. Okay, so it's going to quickly load into the setup, and it's going to probably have us format our drive because our drive is Windows doesn't know what it is. It just knows it's a 15 gig IDE volume, but that's it. Hey, looks like it's booting. So I don't want to boot from CD. I won't press any keys. And now it should be booting the Windows XP installer from the actual virtual hard disk. And check it out. That's something Apple doesn't want you to see. Hot dog. That's freaking cool. Okay. So now we just got to go through our Windows installer as if it were any other day on a classic old PC. And yeah, it looks like it's doing that all by itself. It will be done in approximately 39 minutes. See you then. And hot freaking dog. That is Windows XP. Look at this. The cursor's really, really responsive. I'm kind of surprised. We're going to the Start menu, and it seems to run pretty quickly. Is it as fast as a native computer? No. But it's not terrible. Our computer might be at risk of a virus. Be careful. See, so it loads relatively quickly. Once it's booted, it's not bad at all. We go into our local disk here, show the contents of the folder. Everything looks to be pretty good. But running Windows XP really isn't that useful nowadays, because what are you going to do with it? Well, I've got an idea. We're going to go in here. We are going to terminate the virtual machine. So we're going to close it. And now that Windows is installed, we don't need the DVD drive inside the system to have inside of it. Let's go to Devices. We don't need to have this volume there at all. We do want a CD DVD, but we could put something else on there, say Half-Life. So let's go in here. Let's press the plus button. We're going to import again. And I have right here the ISO for Half-Life Game of the Year Edition. We're going to select that. It's going to be a CD. We are going to save that, and let's reboot our Windows XP virtual machine. And this time, in theory, Half-Life should be available inside of my computer. Oh, wait a minute. Is it turned on? Okay, so who needs a mouse? Let's enter the game here. We're going to go into local disk. We're going to go into Sierra, Half-Life, and Half-Life. Here we go. Oh. Hold on. I'm going to have to Google the CD key real fast. And that's all there is to it, boys. And look at this. This is actually running pretty okay, it seems. I can't tell if it's running slowly. Do we have any audio? I'd love audio. We should, in theory. Oh, it's muted. Oh, yeah, baby. That's friggin' sweet. Okay, start a new game. Medium. Oh. Okay.
Good morning and welcome to the Black Mesa Transit System. This automated train.
That display size, we got to figure that out.
Of the Black Mesa Research Facility personnel.
Oh no. What have I done?
The time is 8:47
a.m. Oh boy.
Current topside temperature is.
Oh, what's going on?
With an estimated high.
Yeah.
100.
Okay, so check this out. It's pretty responsive. I mean, I play on the keyboard and the resolution isn't spectacular, but it runs really well until I touch the mouse. This thing is whacked out of its mind. I can't tell what's going on. And it doesn't work any better if I use the trackpad, which is a bit of a bummer. I'm sure you could probably figure that out, but it's not ideal. What was this video about again? Oh yeah, macOS on the iPad. So there's a problem with macOS. They have long moved away from a minimum RAM requirement of 2 gigs, which you'll remember is about our maximum. So we're gonna have to run a pretty old version of macOS. I figured, why not run macOS 10.5 Leopard? Because that's the same version that this mod book is running that was made back in about 2007. It would be cool to see real Apple hardware trying to be a tablet versus a real tablet trying to be macOS hardware. The install is very similar to Windows. All we have to do is go here, click the plus button. We're going to name this macOS 10. We're going to give it an architecture of, you know what? Actually, let's do a PowerPC architecture. That could be fun. And we will try and emulate a Power Mac. Cool. We're going to give it 2 gigs of memory. 2 gigs of memory, 2048. And then we're going to go into set up our drives, and the exact same thing with Windows. We're going to add one by path. So we're going to import our ISO here. So here's our Leopard ISO. Cool. Yes, select. Okay, we're going to click that. We're going to call this our CD DVD drive. Perfect. And then we need to go in and add our actual hard drive. So we are going to create a new drive. We're going to call it HDD, and we're going to give it a size of about 15 gigs, 15,000 megabytes. Great. We're going to select that. We're then going to tell the VM that that is our disk image. Perfect. And oh, one last thing that's a little weird. We need to go in here and we need to disable the sound card. For whatever reason, it wasn't working. So once we do that, we press play and check it out, baby. It is the real, the one, the only macOS on our iPad Pro being emulated right here on the device. That's freaking cool. Okay, see how long this thing takes to install. All right, it successfully booted into the installer. We were able to format the virtual drive in Disk Utility and then install macOS on top of it. And check it out, install failed. Don't worry though, this is not that big of a deal. This is a pretty common thing with macOS VMs. All we need to do, and the reason it's failing is it's trying to boot into the virtual drive that we've set up. But because the CD is set as the priority boot volume, it can't actually get into that loop. So we are going to shut down the VM. Okay. We are then going to reopen UTM. We're going to go to macOS 10. We're going to go to System. And then we are going to go to try booting first from the hard disk. Okay, and then just to be sure, we probably don't need to do this, but just to be sure, let's go into Drives and Images, Edit, and let's delete that install image. So now we're only booting off of the hard drive disk that has macOS installed. So we'll know right now if the installation went according to plan. Okay, that's promising. And we have a boot logo, so that's good. And in theory, in a couple seconds, a couple minutes, I don't know how slowly this VM is going to run, we are going to get to the boot screen where we can, or the setup screen where we can set up our new macOS 10.5 Leopard Mac. Okay, it booted. It worked, I think. We need to go through the setup. It can't recognize this keyboard. I wouldn't be surprised if the smart keyboard doesn't really work, but it does. We'll tell it that it is a standard United States keyboard. Check it out. We are setting up macOS. Don't transfer information. Although we could use a time machine backup. No, you couldn't, because, you know. Wow, it really wants me to log into my Apple ID? Okay, sure. I don't think this will work, but let's try it. Yeah, I was like, there's no way those activation servers are still online, but we can fill in my name, Quinn Nelson, and then continue. You have to put your address? No, I'm not gonna do that. Pass, delete, no. Hello, Drive, Chuck E. Cheese, our state, Nebraska. Is that Nebraska, N-E? Or is that, I don't know.
N-E.
Okay, give it a California zip code. And our phone number, 8675309, of course, which is Marquez Brownlee's number too. Oh, I need the area code. Okay. Cool. Why do I have to answer all of these things? I don't need to tell you why I want this Mac. We used to have to do this. I run a large business, 500 plus employees. What explains what I do? I'm retired. Stay in touch. No, do not email me. Man, this is something else. Okay, password. We're going to do the ever secure password. Okay. And now, in theory, the screen resolution, by the way, is very low, but I should be able to change that later on. Right now I'm using a VGA adapter, but once I know how fast macOS runs, and that was kind of my worry, is that it would be very, very slow in emulation, and scaling up in resolution does not help you in that matter. If it runs okay, then I'll increase resolution, and it should look a little bit better. It is connecting to Apple. I don't think that's going to work. It's going to time out. It does have a network connection. It's tethered to my iPad's Wi-Fi connection, but oh, you know what? Maybe it's working. Talking with Apple. I like how they don't say like sending information or registration or contacting server. We're talking with Apple. Just the internet is still kind of, you know, new. Hang on, we're talking with the man. Okay, it's booted. We are in macOS 10. It does feel pretty slow, and part of the reason I think is because it's just a VM. The other part is because I think it is indexing the local hard drive, and that would always slow down brand new Macs. So I'm assuming that after a couple hours, once that's done, the performance would improve. But if we go into About This Mac, oh man, yeah, that's real slow. We've got a macOS 10.5.4, and we're running a 900 megahertz PowerPC G4 processor with 2 gigs of memory. Wow, look at that. We could, of course, open System Preferences, and it's just it's pretty slow. I mean, that's not very fast. This is not the speed of a usable device. I mean, by comparison, let's turn on the mod book here. And this screen is extremely dim. But if we grab this, we click System Preferences, and you know what? That's kind of slow too. Okay, so macOS was just, computers were slow back in the day. But I mean, if we do another speed test, let's do Safari against Safari. It's going to be no contest. So we'll give the iPad a head start. We'll tap Safari right here, then we'll tap Safari right here. And I mean, the mod book wins hands down. It loaded it faster, and it was several seconds behind. Apparently it can't open livepage.apple.com. What about just regular apple.com? Yeah, all this old SSL stuff makes loading old websites hard. Okay, so our mod book does an okay job. We can scroll through the content here. Not shabby. The iPad is really struggling. Let's see which one can quit faster. Here we go. Safari. Oh no. Safari? Okay, well that's loading the menu. I'll just go here and then drag down to quit. Come on, buddy. Okay. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Okay, it seems like part of the speed issues in the VM were the fact that I was recording the iPad's own screen. It's still not fast, but it seems relatively comparable to the 2006 MacBook I have behind me. Computers were just slower back then. But do you know what? There is this constant saying by a lot of people that there's no way a touchscreen Mac could come to be because Apple just hasn't optimized macOS for touch. I think macOS Big Sur has proven that statement wrong. All of the menu bar items are further spaced apart, Control Center is completely designed for fingers, the dock has uniformity and all the icons are the same. But even in this old version of macOS that is not at all designed for touch, I think it's completely tenable. I mean, if you tap that file menu, I have no problem at all touching any single one of these little menu bar items. And go to New Tab. Again, I'm scrolling the cursor, so it's not quite the same, but I can tap that, no problem. I mean, touchscreens are really good. Is this ideal? No. But I think that the solution Big Sur has come up with is a lot better. And this, the idea of running macOS on a tablet, on a computer this big, that you could throw onto a keyboard at any time and then close and then take with you, and oh, you want a pen? Yeah, you can do that too. That just seems so cool to me. UTM is not really a solution. It's fun to play around with, and I suggest you should. But we're probably all going to be waiting for macOS on an iPad until Apple brings it, which may never happen. Well, folks, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you didn't, that other button seems to work okay too. Let me know what you think about the future of touchscreen Macs in the comments down below. And as always, stay snazzy.